The Joseph Smith Papyri recovered to date are fragments from 3 separate books, 2 partial copies of the Book of the Dead and 1 partial copy of the Book of Breathings. The extant fragments do not contain any text from the Book of Abraham. One naturally asks, how much papyrus is missing? Because the circumference of a scroll limits the length of papyrus that can be contained inside it, one can estimate how much papyrus is missing from the interior end of the scroll by measuring the circumference of the roll and the tightness of the winding. Using this mathematical approach, Egyptologist John Gee has estimated that the Book of Breathings of Hor is missing approximately 41 feet of papyrus. We refer to the extant Joseph Smith papyri as fragments because that is exactly what they are. Once the papyri fragments were recovered, it was discovered that they had been glued onto Kirtland-era paper in an apparent attempt to prevent further damage from wear and age. Note how scraps from other papyri were glued in to patch the holes. The scraps used do not belong to this scroll, and in some cases the text is glued in upside down. It is unknown who patched these holes. Hugh Nibley wrote, "Indeed, it is a question whether the Book of Abraham has suffered more damage from its friends or from its enemies. For like other things Egyptian, it has exerted an irresistible attraction for everyone to get into the act." Above is shown the papyri as recovered from the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, and below are the approximate original positions of the papyri fragments with the scraps removed. This is Joseph Smith Papyrus number 2. In this scene, we find symbolic parallels to heaven and the afterlife. We see the Egyptians sowing seeds among the trees while dressed in long pleated robes. Using similar symbolic imagery, Alma associated the sowing of seeds and the nourishing of trees with man's ability to achieve everlasting life in the world to come. Said he, "Now we will compare the word unto a seed. Now if ye give place, that a seed may be planted in your heart, behold, if it be a true seed, or a good seed, if ye do not cast it out by your unbelief, that ye will resist the Spirit of the Lord, behold, it will begin to swell within your breasts. And when you feel these swelling motions, you will begin to say within yourselves, it must needs be that this is a good seed, or that the word is good, for it beginneth to enlarge my soul, yea, it beginneth to enlighten my understanding. Yea, it beginneth to be delicious to me. And now behold, if you nourish it with much care, it will get root, and grow up, and bring forth fruit. Yea, nourish the tree as it beginneth to grow, by your faith with great diligence, and with patience, looking forward to the fruit thereof. It shall take root, and behold, it shall be a tree springing up unto everlasting life." Hugh Nibley explained, Joseph Smith Papyrus number 2 shows the dead sowing in green fields among the trees and by the waters, over which she also sails. That this is no ordinary farm is seen in the ritual robes of the lady and the inscription above the oxen, the heaven to its entire extent, an idiom apparently telling us that this represents heaven or paradise. It is not an earthly farm here depicted, for the sowers are not clad in the familiar scanty manner of Egyptian field workers, but wear long white linen temple robes, and they do not carry bags of seeds. Moreover, they sow among the trees, while just beyond them, here drawn just above them according to the Egyptian convention of perspective, one is seen traveling by boat. It is the ritual garden by the river. The symbolic association of heaven or paradise with sacred trees is found throughout the scriptures. In the book of Revelation we read, "To him that overcometh will I give to eat of the tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise of God." From Proverbs, "The fruit of the righteous is a tree of life." And from the Book of Mormon, "The wicked are rejected from the righteous, and also from that tree of life, whose fruit is most precious and most desirable above all other fruits. Yea, it is the greatest of all the gifts of God." Here is the reverse side of Joseph Smith Papyrus number 2. As you can see, it has a map of the Kirtland area. Apparently, the early church members were being frugal and reusing paper. This is Joseph Smith Papyrus number 3. The images on this fragment are a little more difficult to see than the images on the other fragments. But if we look closely, on the far left we see Osiris, the chief of the Westerners, sitting on a throne with the scepters of justice and judgment in his hands. Before him we see the four sons of Horus standing atop a large lotus blossom. To their right, Ammit, the devourer of the dead, and behind him Thoth or Thoth, who is recording everything. On the bottom right we see Maat leading an initiate through the ceremony of the weighing of the heart. In the center, at the bottom, we see a large scale where the initiate's heart is being weighed against the standard of truth. To make the image easier to see, here is a reconstructed drawing, courtesy of Michael P. Lyon. The image depicts a judgment scene, commonly referred to as the ceremony of the weighing of the heart. Here the initiate is being instructed by Maat, who is depicted wearing her traditional feather headdress. The symbol under the lotus designates the place as the hall of the two Maats. At the base of the lotus, we see jars, often used for holding water and oil. Osiris is the judge who sits upon the throne. He is declared to be the great god, the ruler of eternity. Osiris was one of the most important deities in ancient Egypt. His birth, death, burial, resurrection, and ascension embraced the leading points of Egyptian theology. He was associated with the secret rites performed in Egyptian temples. From the great hymn to Osiris we read, "Hail to you, Osiris, Lord of eternity, King of the gods, of many names, of holy forms, of secret rites in temples." The observant individual will notice that there are numerous symbolic parallels between Osiris and the Lord Jesus Christ. Osiris was the first to resurrect and was revered as the merciful judge of the dead in the afterlife. It was believed that he was eternally good. His titles included the Mighty One, the Great God, the Ruler of Eternity, the Lord of the Universe, and the King of the Gods. Likewise, in Holy Writ, Jesus Christ is referred to as the Mighty One, the Great God, the Rightful Ruler, the All-Powerful Creator of heaven and earth, the Lord of Lords, and God of Gods. Further, the relationship between Osiris and the sun god Re has striking symbolic parallels to the relationship between Jesus Christ and God the Father. A complex and particularly important relationship existed between Osiris and the sun god Re. Osiris's position became, in fact, comparable to that of the sun god himself. He came to be regarded not only as the counterpart of Re in the netherworld, but also in some cases as the sun god's own body, so that Osiris and Re came to be considered as representing the body and soul, respectively, of a single great god. Nevertheless, Osiris and Re maintained independent characteristics, identities, and realms. Egyptian kings sought to become one with Osiris, and thereby also become one with the sun god Re. Although the Egyptian king became one with Osiris upon death, he was also fused with the sun god Re. Just as the living monarch was held to be the son of Osiris, but fused with the deity upon death, so the living king, known as the son of Re, could fuse with his father Re upon his entry into the afterlife. In a symbolic parallel, Jesus Christ taught that he and his Father were one. He invited all mankind to become one with him, and thereby also become one with his Father. In his great intercessory prayer, Christ said, "Neither pray I for these alone, but for them also which shall believe on me through their word, that they all may be one, as thou, Father, art in me, and I in thee, that they also may be one in us. And the glory which thou gavest me I have given them, that they may be one, even as we are one, I in them, and thou in me, that they may be made perfect in one." Here is the translation of the text on Joseph Smith Papyrus number 3, courtesy of Professor Michael D. Rhodes. Beginning on the left, we see that Osiris has the title, the Great God, Ruler of Eternity. Osiris is not just a passive observer of this ceremony. Rather, he had a role to play, and there were words to be recited by Osiris, foremost of the West. Why is he referred to as foremost of the West? Well, In Egypt, the majority of Egyptian cemeteries were constructed on the west bank of the Nile River, being a symbolic parallel with the direction of the setting sun in the underworld. Deceased persons were often referred to as Westerners, and Osiris, because he was the first to resurrect, was referred to as the foremost of the West. Next we see the sons of Horus, Thoth, and Maat all have roles to play in this ceremony. And of course there are words to be recited by the initiate, who has taken up the name of Osiris upon her. In similar symbolic fashion, modern Christians take the name of Christ upon them. As such, she is referred to as the Osiris, the musician of Amun-Ra. It is a fitting title, for a musician is one who plays a part, and here Neferirnub plays the lead role as she comes forth bearing truth. In the ceremony of the weighing of the heart of the deceased is usually depicted being weighed against the feather of Maat. The goddess Maat personified the concepts of truth, justice, and cosmic order. She is known to have existed at least from the Old Kingdom and is mentioned in the Pyramid texts, where she is said to stand behind the sun god Re. The goddess was also associated with Osiris, who is said to be Lord of Maat at an early date. Maat represented the universal order and balance, including concepts such as truth and right, which was established at the time of creation. Maat also actively represented the concept of judgment. In the Pyramid texts, the goddess appears in this role in dual form as the two Maats judging the deceased king's right to the thrones of Geb, and in later funerary literature, it is in the Hall of the Two Truths, the dual form of Maat, that the judgment of the deceased occurs. The gods themselves, acting as judges of the divine tribunal, are called the Council of Maat. Joseph Smith Papyrus No. 3 shows the weighing of the initiate's heart in the Judgment Hall, or the Hall of the Two Maats. Before gaining admission to the hall, initiates were purified by Edjo and Nekhbet. As a result of this lustration, they were cleansed from all evil, every abomination, and received the name Stone of Righteousness. This illustrates the principle of receiving a new name at an important stage in the initiation. At this point, one also receives a token. Name and stone go together. The Egyptians believed that every god and goddess had a secret name. If anyone could find out that name, he would have power over that god or goddess. For example, the sun god Re had many different names, but the one that held the key to his supreme power was a secret one that only he knew. Knowledge of a name was equated with power. To know a name was to be able to exercise a certain degree of control over the deity or person or thing to which it belonged. Knowing the relevant names was particularly crucial in spells and their accompanying rituals. Egyptian priests were known to stand upon an alabaster stone to be ceremonially purified through washings and anointings before officiating in the temples. Hugh Nibley wrote, "The Egyptian sacred stone is either white or green or both. Most often it is green. The candidate is named Stone of Truth as he is cleansed or declared clean by two ladies, having been just washed with water by two others, Edjo and Nekhbet, both of whom are represented by green plants, symbolic of the life that sustains the cosmos itself. Anyone entering an Egyptian temple had to undergo ritual ablutions in a shallow tank or bath, or squatting or standing upon a stone pedestal. Such a pedestal has been found at Karnak. It bears an inscription specifying it was to be used by the priests to purify themselves before they officiated in a temple. It was of alabaster, and the inscription read, "Purification pedestal of alabaster of Hatnub, for the use of the priests, that he may make an endowment with life like Re forever." The use of an alabaster stone may have had symbolic connotations. Alabaster is a translucent mineral, usually a shade of white or soft yellow. Egyptians were known to place a candle inside an alabaster jar to create a unique visual experience. Light would shine forth from the rock. A symbolic parallel can be seen in the imagery used to describe the Urim and Thummim. Alma taught that the interpreters were prepared that truth might be brought forth out of darkness unto light. In Hebrew, the words Urim and Thummim mean lights and perfections. Further, in the Doctrine and Covenants, we learn that the place where God resides is a great Urim and Thummim, that is like a sea of glass and fire, and that the earth in its sanctified and immortal state will be made like unto crystal, and will be a Urim and Thummim to the inhabitants who dwell thereon. The alabaster stone and the new name given to the Egyptian initiate foreshadows the white stone and the new name given to those who entered into the celestial kingdom. The symbolic parallels are striking and may explain why a number of white stones have been found in prehistoric Egyptian graves. In the book of Revelation we read, "To him that overcometh will I give to eat of the hidden manna, and will give him a white stone, and in the stone a new name written, which no man knoweth saving he that receiveth it." In modern-day revelation, the Lord has revealed, "And a white stone is given to each of those who come into the celestial kingdom, whereon is a new name written, which no man knoweth save he that receiveth it." The new name is a key word. On this mummy mask scene, Horus holds in his hand the hieroglyph for water jar. Osiris is covered by a sheath, as he receives ceremonial washings with water. The ceremony was intended to purify him and cleanse him from all evil. As stated previously, Joseph Smith Papyrus number 3 shows the weighing of the initiate's heart in the judgment hall, or hall of the two Maats. After being purified through ceremonial washings and receiving a new name, the initiate is given specific instructions on how to dress, act, and speak when entering the judgment hall. In the Book of the Dead, the judgment takes place in the Hall of the Two Maats. This name probably refers to the twin figures of Maat as goddesses who are sometimes depicted guiding the deceased or seated near the balance. Specific instructions are given about dress and manner when entering. This is the way to act toward the Hall of the Two Maats. A man says this speech when he is pure, clean, dressed in fresh clothes, shod in white sandals, painted with eye paint, anointed with the finest oil of myrrh. To gain admission, he must answer the last of many probing questions which have been put to him by the guardian gods during his journey. At the entrance to the hall, the gods ask him to identify himself and pose questions which will reveal his knowledge of mystical matters, in particular with reference to the mysteries of Osiris. "Who are you?" they say to me. "What is your name?" they say to me. After having given his own name, the initiate must show that he knows the names of guardian gods that block his way. This knowledge is demonstrated at the doorway or gate through which the initiate is to pass. As he reveals the names of individual components of the doorway, his interaction with these guardian gods is veiled in symbolism. The initiate is invited to enter. "Come then, and step through the gate of the two Maats, for you know us." But before he can do this, there is further knowledge to be demonstrated. He must give the names of the individual components of the doorway, names which contain allusions to events that will take place within. "We will not let you enter but by us," says the doorpost of the door, "unless you tell our name." "Plummet of truth is your name," responds the initiate. "I will not let you enter by me," says the right-hand leaf of the door, "unless you tell my name." "Scale pan which weighs truth is your name." The process continues until the initiate has successfully answered all of the probing questions put to him by the guardian gods. After having successfully demonstrated his knowledge concerning the mysteries of Osiris, the initiate is called to report. "What have you come for?" "I have come here to report." "What is your condition?" "I am pure from evil. I have excluded myself from the quarrels of those who are now living. I am not among them." "To whom shall I announce you?" "You shall announce me to him whose roof is fire, whose walls are the living Uriah, the floor of whose house is the waters." "Who is he?" "He is Osiris." "Proceed." The initiate is then allowed to proceed. Having been successfully admitted into the Hall of the Two Maats, the initiate stands before the judgment bar to see if he, or she in the case of the Joseph Smith Papyrus, is worthy of eternal life. Joseph Smith Papyrus number 3 shows the symbolic weighing of the initiate's heart. The same scene from the Book of the Dead of Ani is shown below for comparison purposes. The initiate's heart is weighed against the image of Maat, represented by an ostrich feather, and the result is recorded by Thoth. The judgment is final. If found worthy, the initiate is taken by the hand and presented to Osiris. If found wanting, the initiate is handed over to Ammit, the devourer. Here is a magnification of the weighing of the heart from the Book of the Dead of Annie. A balance stands on the floor of the hall, and from its arms 2 scale pans are suspended. In one is placed the heart of the deceased, in the other an image of Maat, which may take the form of an ostrich feather, the hieroglyphic sign for the word, or may be personified as a squatting goddess wearing the feather on her head. If found worthy, Horus presents the deceased to Osiris. His heart is true, having gone forth from the balance, and he has not sinned against any god or any goddess. Finally, the deceased himself speaks to Osiris. Here I am in your presence, O Lord of the West. There is no wrongdoing in my body. I have not wittingly told lies. There has been no second fault. Grant that I may be like the favored ones who are in your suite. O Osiris, one greatly favored by the good God, one loved of the Lord of the 2 lands, Annie vindicated before Osiris. If all did not go well, the unhappy deceased was handed over to a punisher called the Devourer. This monster was a hybrid beast, with a crocodile's head, the forelegs of a lion, and the rear of a hippopotamus. As her name implies, the Devourer's role was to eat the damned. The imagery of this hybrid beast seems to prefigure the writings of Job. Recall that in Job chapter 40 and 41, the Lord, who is often represented as a lion, asked Job to contrast Behemoth the hippopotamus with Leviathan the crocodile. The divine language of symbolism employed by the Lord was not lost on Job as he considered the differences between Behemoth, who is chief of the ways of God, and Leviathan, who is king over all the children of pride. The attributes used by the Lord to describe Behemoth match those of the hippopotamus. The name Behemoth refers to a huge or monstrous creature, something enormous. The average adult hippo weighs more than 3,000 pounds. Behemoth is said to eat grass like an ox. Hippos can consume as much as 150 pounds of grass in a single sitting. Behemoth has bones that are like bars of iron. Hippo bones are extraordinarily dense. Behemoth has a sword. Hippo teeth can reach lengths of more than 1.5 feet. The mountains bring Behemoth food where the beasts of the field play. In like manner, the mountain streams provide water that nourishes the grass and attracts beasts of the field to the river banks. Behemoth lieth under the shady trees, in the covert of the reed. The shady trees cover him with their shadow, the willows of the brook compass him about. In like manner, hippos inhabit rivers, lakes, and swamps that enable them to stay cool. Behemoth hasteth not. Adult hippos move at a top speed of around 5 miles per hour in the water. And perhaps most important symbolically, Behemoth is chief of the ways of God. Adult hippos are chiefs of their domain, and that their great size and strength enables them to avoid predation by other animals. And in like fashion, the Lord describes the attributes of Leviathan, which match those of the crocodile. Crocodiles cannot be tamed or played with like a pet bird. Their mouths have up to 80 teeth and can bite down with incredible force. They have muscular necks, armored skin with thick scales, and eyes on the tops of their heads. They dwell in the mire and in the deep. When they surface, they can cause even the mighty to be afraid. And in stark symbolic contrast with Behemoth, Leviathan is king over all the children of pride. Ammit is a hybrid beast that combines a symbol for God with symbols of the righteous and the wicked. The lion is a symbol of God. The hippopotamus is a symbol of the righteous who pursue the ways of God. The crocodile is a symbol of those who are evil and are puffed up as children of pride. It is true that Egyptians reverenced the crocodile from the earliest times, but their reverence was the result of fear, and the creature was always regarded as the incarnation of a terribly evil power, which manifested itself in the destruction of human and animal life. By combining these 3 symbolisms into one creature, God, the lion, symbolically allows for both the exaltation of the righteous, the hippopotamus, and the destruction of the wicked, the crocodile. If the initiate's heart is pure, he is allowed to proceed by Ammit into the presence of the king and gain exaltation. However, if the initiate's heart is found to be lacking, then he is deprived of eternal life, for Ammit does not allow him to breathe ever again. In the case of the weighing of the heart of Ani, his heart has been proven true. As such, he is allowed to proceed past Ammit and is presented to Osiris. For comparison purposes, let's review similar weighing of the heart scenes from other books of the dead. Note that while each vignette is unique, taken together they share multiple commonalities and reflect an overall general consistency. In this version, the initiate is dressed in a pleated robe, similar to the one worn by the initiate on Joseph Smith Papyrus No. 3. In this version, the depiction of the four sons of Horus standing atop the lotus flower is nearly identical to the corresponding image on Joseph Smith Papyrus No. 3. In this version, from the early Ptolemaic period, the portrayal of Maat is very similar to her depiction on the Joseph Smith Papyrus. Maat wears her traditional feather headdress and holds the ankh in her right hand as she instructs the initiate. In this multicolored version from the 3rd century, the lotus flower is placed upon a stand and the sons of Horus seem to hover above it in an unusual manner. In this weighing of the heart scene, from the Book of the Dead of Ani, you will notice that she raises both hands high above her head. In Egyptian writing, a person with both arms raised high in jubilation formed the determinative meaning rejoice. Further, the upraised arms form the hieroglyph for the Ka, which was the double of man, and was believed to represent a man's spiritual life energy. As such, the Ka was used as a term for the creative and sustaining power of life. The initiate's upraised Ka arms appear to show that she rejoices while recognizing the spiritually sustaining power that is bestowed through participation in the sacred ceremonies. Similarly, the Lord has taught that the power of godliness, a real and sustainable power bestowed by God, is manifest to man through the ordinances of the priesthood. The greater priesthood administereth the gospel and holdeth the key of the mysteries of the kingdom, even the key of the knowledge of God. Therefore, in the ordinances thereof, the power of godliness is manifest. In all periods of Egyptian history, the Ka was used as a term for the sustaining power of life. Here it is shown on a coffin in connection with a doorway for the passage of the soul, and 2 eyes enabling the deceased to look forth onto the world of the living. On this coffin, you will recognize the ceremony of the weighing of the heart. Here, the initiate raises both hands high above the head, forming the position of the Ka arms. Here is yet another example from a different scene in the Book of the Dead. The Ka arms can also be seen carved in stone, as depicted in this example from the Temple of Amun-Ra at Karnak. The belief that spiritually sustaining power or life energy is bestowed through sacred ceremonies is reinforced in Joseph Smith Papyrus No. 4. Here, a food offering, the symbol of temporal life-sustaining energy, is naturally combined with its double, the upraised Ka arms, representing the spiritually sustaining power or life energy one receives through participation in sacred ordinances. The upraised Ka arms embrace the food offering and show that this is no ordinary meal. It is a sacramental meal, a meal that provides spiritual nourishment. Hugh Nibley wrote, "Throughout the ancient world, purification and clothing rites are regularly followed by a ritual meal. Originally a dominant theme in the rites of purification and opening of the mouth, the taking of nourishment was progressively reduced until it became a mere gesture or a few chanted words. A devout Egyptian reports that he faithfully did his monthly stint in the temple, putting on the white sandals, reciting the secret things, entering the Holy of Holies, and eating of the bread of the house of God, strongly reminiscent of the showbread of the Temple of Jerusalem. Since the taking of spiritual nourishment was a dominant theme in the ceremony of the opening of the mouth, one naturally asks, what was this ceremony, and what was its purpose? The ceremony known as the opening of the mouth consisted of 75 separate acts involving the touching of the mouth, eyes, ears, nose, and other parts of the body with a variety of different ritual implements. The use of these instruments was believed to restore the dead person's ability to see, breathe, eat, and drink in the next life. Observant Latter-day Saints will naturally recognize many parallels between the ceremony of the opening of the mouth and ordinances performed in modern-day temples.